When I come to your city, I'm a new score. Broke your high score as soon as I step through the door. Tryna stack my paper up like a bookstore. Money kissing each other like a rock and roll tour. When I come to your city, I'm a new score. Broke your high score as soon as I step through the door. Tryna stack my paper up like a bookstore. Money kissing each other.
What's going on? Welcome to the New Score podcast. My name is Pat. Unfortunately, Tyler will not be joining me on this episode. He's out of town, but we got it covered. I will be joined by multiple guests. I will not be alone on this podcast, so hang in there. We got some segments coming up. We're going to talk about some NFL Super Bowl recap, takeaways from the Super Bowl, important offseason decisions coming up. We'll talk a little NFL draft, dive into some NBA first half of the season recap. It is All-Star weekend. Talk about that a little bit. Trade deadline recap. What we think about what's going to happen doing down the stretch here. Also going to talk about some NHL, and I got it covered tonight. We got a bunch of guests coming on. It's going to be a good one. So don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Spotify. We are on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We're on X. And we are on TikTok. So follow along. Just got back from Arizona. It's been a couple weeks. Been a long couple weeks. So we've been slacking a little bit with the pod. But we're back in action. Waste management was an absolute shit show for anybody that's never been out there. It's a great time. But I would recommend not going on Saturday because it was absolutely chaotic. Ended up shutting down booze sales in the afternoon, and people who had tickets couldn't even get in at a certain point because there were so many people. But also went to a Phoenix Suns game. That was a blast. Tyler, myself, and our boy Weed had a great time out there. But it's good to be back. It's good to be talking some sports again. Let's get into it start off with the NFL. A couple takeaways I have from the game itself was I thought it was a phenomenal game. One of the most entertaining Super Bowls that I've witnessed. Just went down to the wire. We had overtime. I actually had a bet that had the game going in overtime. It's what I was rooting for. So that turned out to be great. And just the fact that it was a competitive football game, from the beginning to the end. Even though the 49ers were up 10-0 in that game, you just knew that the Chiefs were going to make a run, and they did. I don't want to talk too much about the game by myself because we got some guests coming on here shortly that we'll dive into it with. But I will say that the Chiefs have now won 3 Super Bowls. Mahomes has been in the conference championship every single year since he's been a starter. And I understand people being, sick of him, annoyed, because that's what happens when, like the Michael Jordans, Tom Brady's, Patrick Mahomes is in that conversation now where they just keep winning and it gets annoying. It gets frustrating for people. Sometimes it's hard to just appreciate greatness. But to me, I don't feel fatigued at all. And it's because I think Patrick Mahomes is good of a football player as he is, and he may go down as the greatest. I think he's just so humble, and like the humility that dude has. Imagine being better than anybody at something in life and like having that humbleness to you. Like, the kid's got it all. He's got it going on. He's on track to shatter every record in the book. And every time you hear him talk, it's about his team. It's about his family. It's never about him in particular. He's always giving credit where credit's due. He won't even call Andy Reid Andy. Just like the respect that he has for his coach and the coaching staff in general. it's always Coach Reed. Like, he's got it all, and he remains to be a very respectable guy, in my opinion. I know people are exhausted of him and the Chiefs in general, and the Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce shit being what it is. I'm with you on that. Like, that shit is exhausting. I'm over it. Does it maybe make you not want the Chiefs to advance because you're just done hearing about it? I can understand that. I'm with that. But just the sheer like hate that Mahomes is getting, I'm not on board with any of that, because dude is incredible, and I find him very easy to root for. But let's dive into some segments. Let's start off with the NFL. Joining me now for our Super Bowl recap, diving into an NFL segment, I got Tyler Albrecht, Todd Albrecht. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Doing good.
Good to see you guys.
Great to see you guys. This is a family special. I love this. Tyler's out today, unfortunately, not going to be able to join us, but we should have no issue talking some ball, talking some Super Bowl, talking some offseason. I want to talk a little bit about the draft coming up. But diving into this Super Bowl, Tyler, your Kansas City Chiefs, do it again, pull it off, 25-22. I said it in the beginning. I thought it was a phenomenal Super Bowl, one of the best that I watched. It was so entertaining. It helped that I was, outside of the bar in Phoenix, so it was just a great setting and everything. And I thought it was a great game, even when the Chiefs went down 10-0. All my money was on the Chiefs, and in the end, you pull it off. Some takeaways that I had from it: I see Brock Purdy getting killed this week because he lost the Super Bowl. And I just think that's been the common theme all season. People killing Brock Purdy. Oh, my God, it's his team. Well, yeah, if you make the Super Bowl, you're going to have a good team. If you make a run, you have to have a good team. You can't knock the quarterback because of that. I thought Purdy played exceptionally well in this game, given the circumstances against that defense. It's his second year, people, so let's slow down. And any quarterback who has ever played in a Super Bowl has had talent on his team. I promise you that. So not with the Brock Purdy slander. I thought he played well. Obviously, the punt, where not the muff, but when it hits the guy, the 49ers hits his foot, and then the Chiefs get on top of it. I thought that was the absolute turning point. All the momentum swung Kansas City's way right after that. Immediately get a touchdown. And then after that, I was just like, okay, now it's coming. They're not going to slow down. But the Niners stuck with them. They answered with their own touchdown, and then Mahomes responded again. I want to talk a little bit with you guys about Shanahan's decision overtime to take the ball, because this is the first time it's ever happened with the new postseason rule, where it's been, both teams are going to get the ball regardless, even if the first team scores a touchdown. So it's interesting to me that he took the ball first. I want to dive into that a little bit with you guys, but I want to talk about what you guys thought about Brock Purdy's performance. Tyler, go ahead.
So I do want to make a comment on the Super Bowl, like in the first half. It was a sloppy game on both sides. And I think that worked out well for the Chiefs because they're okay being in that area. I feel like Purdy's not as comfortable, especially going against that defense. They want to make it sloppy. They want to make it physical. But honestly, I think Purdy played as well as he could have, as well as you could have asked for him. The defense does a lot of sim pressures. They bring McDuffie off the slot. They bring Justin Reed from deep safety. They do a lot with changing up pressures, confusing them. They ran a bunch of cover zero. They ran a bunch of man. They're actually the highest percentage of man all year. So they were forcing Purdy to beat him, but the corners just played phenomenal. I mean, Ayuk had barely any separation. Debo had minimal separation all game. They shut down Kittle. I mean, you couldn't have asked more from Purdy, I feel like. I mean, again, if you watch any of the line of scrimmage play, both Snead and McDuffie are right in Debo and Brandon Ayuk's face every snap. So, with that D line, they were just banking on, making them hold the ball long enough where no one's open, and, he's getting pressure at that point. So yeah, I feel like Purdy played as well as you could have asked him to. Obviously the team around him's good, but it should be, they were the number 1 seed. No quarterback can do it alone. So, I mean, it should be a good team, and that should be a knock against him. So I totally agree. I mean, he's a second-year guy. You couldn't have asked for more, and he's making less than $1 million, like $900,000 a year. So he's not going to hurt the team by any means. So you can have that superstar team around him. So yeah, I think Purdy played as well as he could have.
Todd, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so Tyler and I actually were texting back and forth during the game. And I echo what he said. Like I told him, I'm like, this game is like sloppy. Like we felt like it wasn't like the best football product we'd seen all year. And like I said to Tyler via text, is like, you have to credit some of that to the defense. They made these offenses look a little sloppy. But there was a lot of holding during the game, and that's on both sides. That's both offense and defense, and both the Niners and Kansas City. And I felt like, they were throwing some flags early on, and I just got the impression like New York's like, this is a Super Bowl, let this roll, because it's not putting out a good impression. And after that first bunch of flags, it seemed like there really wasn't much after that. And the other thing is, too, I was kind of shocked that, I don't know, I thought we'd see more CMC and Pachenko early on. But then at the end of the game, let's be honest. I mean, the end of the fourth quarter was Mahomes just taking over, and then in overtime, that was, Mahomes is just completely different than anything we've seen.
He's built for that moment. I mean, once the game got to a certain point, it's when the 49ers only get 3 in overtime, I said it was over. And then the NFL rigged people out there, God bless them, not on that boat. They're going all week talking about, how the refs ruined the Super Bowl. And I'm just like, did you watch the game, or what were you occupied doing? Probably tweeting or something, because in that game, it's 3rd down. The Chiefs stop the Niners, and the Chiefs are going to get the ball back, even score. All they need is a field goal. The game's over. But they called the defensive holding on Kansas City that gave San Francisco a 1st down, allowed them to continue the drive, got a field goal in overtime, and hey, that field goal could have been the difference. So, I mean, it could have been that defensive holding that was the difference in the game that everybody wants to forget about because, oh my God, the NFL is rigged. But even when the 49ers, like when the Chiefs stop them and force a field goal, I said, this game's over, man. Mahomes is, like you said, Todd, he's different. He's going to go down and he's going to score a touchdown. And if the 49ers were going to score a touchdown, I would have said, okay, now Mahomes is going to go down, score a touchdown, and get the 2, because that's just that's how special he is. But I thought it, like I said, incredible game, and then another huge play in that game. Can't forget about this play. Is 4th quarter, 49ers have it 3rd down, and if they get a 1st down, all they need to do is run out the clock, and then the game's over essentially. Kick a field goal or whatever, but there's not going to be much time at all, if any. Like the Chiefs might not even gotten the ball back at that point. And Spags draws up blitz for McDuffie. McDuffie gets to Purdy, and that was huge play. I mean, what a year for McDuffie. What a year for Snead. Talk about some decisions that they're going to have to make down the stretch, but I want to talk about the 49ers. Do you guys expect this team to be back next season? And is it critical that they bring back Brandon Ayuk? Tyler, go ahead.
So just to backtrack, I think neither of us really touched on the decision to, take the ball. That made no sense. I don't understand that at all. Why give the Chiefs the option to know exactly what they need? So that opens up play calling, gives them 4 downs for every drive that they have. Even they went for on 4th and 1 at their own 32 or whatever. If they, got the ball first, they may have punted there or something like that too, and it changed their play calling. So I have no idea what the Niners were doing with that call. And even players didn't seem to know the overtime rules as they're coming out with it versus the Chiefs.
Yes.
And it came out, the Chiefs, they talked about it 3 times over the course of the 2 weeks on what they would do if they win the toss, if they don't, all of that. And they were going to go for 2. They've come out and said that at this point, and just go for the sudden death win there. Yeah, for the Niners.
Before we Todd, anything you want to add on that? Because I don't want to forget about that. That's my bad. Thank you for not letting us get past that.
Yeah, like I said, Tyler and I were texting, and I was like, "What the hell? What's the point in actually taking the ball first? You're showing your hand. Period. I mean, there's no other way of looking. So you're telling me, like, the argument was that, well, we would have got the ball third if it was tied after 2 possessions, and then that would have put the game away. Are you kidding me? I mean, no. Don't show your hand. Defer. Then you see what you have to do.
And the fact that I've seen there's mic'd up moments throughout that game already out that people can watch. And after the coin toss, Kyle Juszczyk didn't even know what the hell was going on. It's like these guys weren't briefed at all on the overtime rules. Yeah. And that's just absurd to me to think about. It's like, hey, I think everybody suspected that this was going to be a really close game. And the fact that doesn't even come up in conversation. Meanwhile, Andy Reid and their guys, their staff, they got it squared away where they've done it multiple times, week in, week out. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference sometimes. It's things like that nobody thinks about. And that's what made, every single dynasty had knacks like that where they had those guys in their building. And now it's like the analytics people. And if you take the time to cover everything, cover all those small things that nobody thinks about, can really make a difference. And it made a huge difference in the Super Bowl. But Tyler, thoughts on the Niners coming up?
Yeah, I mean, without looking at the roster too deep, I don't think they're losing that many. I think they actually do have to pay Ayuk. I don't see that this offense with just Debo and Kittle, and then maybe they draft a guy or have to bring in a young guy. I don't see that offense being the same. You have that window right now where Purdy's extremely cheap. I think you do have to pay Ayuk, and I think you have to keep getting weapons around them. I also think the offensive line, they do need to invest in a little bit. Trent Williams obviously is an all-timer. However, he didn't look great in the Super Bowl. He was getting beat a few plays here and there. I just don't think he's that rock solid stud on the offensive line that can just do one-on-ones all game anymore. So I do think that they need to invest a little bit in the O-line. But yeah, I don't see why they wouldn't be that top 2 seeds next year again.
Todd, what do you think?
I think they're competing for it, but I think you have to look at the Lions, another year to grow. I mean, they are still a young team. Like, you kind of get the impression like winning's still new to them. And as much as I hate to say it too, I mean, I think Green Bay's found their guy with Jordan Love too. I mean, they made a short little run there late in the season, but I kind of expect them to be there. So, are the 49ers back in the big game? I don't know. They'll be competing for it. I don't know if they're there.
I mean, who knows? If I had to bet, right now, I would say the 49ers would be back, though, because I see them paying Ayuk, and this team's just going to be on a mission next season. Like, they had a phenomenal season, and it just came up short to Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and, the dynasty. Once again, like, that's their only fault is that. And it's just been heartbreak after heartbreak for them. Can't say I feel for them because it's whatever. It's the Niners, but I expect them to be back next year. They did fire Steve Wilkes. I didn't want to forget about that. That was interesting. You don't see very often where a coordinator gets fired after a team make a Super Bowl. Any thoughts you guys have on that?
I don't get it, honestly. I don't know if he was a scapegoat or what, but I don't know how you can, anything can really land on him. I mean, I thought the unit as a whole played well all year.
Yeah, only knack I have on him is I feel like the Niners defense played pretty static for most of the playoff games. They kept to their game plan, and when it was working great, when it wasn't, it was a little bit tougher. But again, they came back against the Lions. They held in there against the Chiefs. I don't think the defense was the issue, in that game at all.
last thing on them, people forget about because it's been so long that he's been out. A difference maker on that defense is Hufanga, the safety. I mean, all-pro guy. That guy would have made a huge difference on that defense. So they just – and then Greenlaw. We can't – like Greenlaw getting hurt, going onto the field in the Super Bowl, tearing his
Bizarre.
Achilles. It's unheard of. I mean, great linebacker goes down, and then Hufanga comes back healthy, hopefully next year fully. I expect that team to be right back in it, but we'll see what happens, and we'll see what they do for DC. That'll be an interesting topic coming up these next couple weeks. But Tyler, your Kansas City Chiefs are in the midst of a dynasty right now. Had you on a couple times already talking about just how awesome it's been, starting it when you were younger, where the Chiefs once were, and now where you are now with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. It's something that the NFL has really never seen. I know we saw the Patriots, but there were some lapses in there with the Patriots, and with Mahomes, there's no season that he's had where it's been, like a letdown. It's been conference title every single year he started. And he's got 3 Super Bowls in 6 years. Numbers, those will stack up to Brady, yes, but this just feels so much different because these first 3 rings feels like it's been carried by Mahomes, while Brady's first 3 rings, nothing against the GOAT, but those were the Belichick teams, those were the Belichick defenses, the Seymour, McGinnis, Ty Law, Teddy Bruschi, Lawyer Malloy, that defense was stacked. So it's just a different feel right now where Mahomes, yes, their defense was great this year, but the guy has been incredible ever since he's been in the league. And it's been, NFL MVP. It's been everything. He's done everything unheard of. But what are your thoughts? What are your emotions?
Yeah, I think, the biggest piece of it is I think this year he's actually grown the most in probably his worst statistical year by far. But he has gone on record on saying that he's learned how to win with his defense. He's learned, like the Ravens game. They could have easily they could have continued to move the ball and being aggressive, but they didn't have to because the defense was shutting them down. So I think learning how to win with different teams, because realistically, if you are going to go on that Brady-esque, run for, 7 rings there, you're going to go with probably 3 completely different rosters, really. So I think learning different ways to win, I think, was the biggest development this year. Because you're right, the defense absolutely brought him there this year. But I think the biggest thing that kind of comes to mind with all of these wins they've been down 10 plus points in all the Super Bowls they've been in. I think Mahomes' numbers when they're down is what makes us, as Chiefs fans, like the most confident in almost any game you're in. He never loses his cool, during the game, always kind of finding whatever needs to happen at that point. So I think that, quote unquote clutch gene or whatever you want to call it, I think that's the biggest component of it. But what comes to mind is I'm still frustrated that they lost to Brady in the Super Bowl and frustrated they lost to him in the AFC Championship game, because you win one of those and all of a sudden he's 2/3 of the way to Brady. So I think that's the biggest piece of it is, kind of keep looking for more and more and more. But I mean, you're right. It's been an unbelievable run, and I don't see it stopping anytime soon because, I mean, really, they're drafting really well. Defense is made up of a bunch of second-year guys who are under contract for another 2 for cheap. So I don't see this nucleus changing much other than, Snead and Chris Jones being free agents.
Like if you could only make one, hypothetically, you could only make one move this offseason, what do the Kansas City Chiefs have to do?
Snead, re-sign Snead. I love Chris Jones. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely love Chris Jones. He's a big, phenomenal leader. He's, in my opinion, the best D tackle in the league, or 1A, 1B, Aaron Donald. But you're paying someone for future production, not past production. Chris Jones is 30. At some point, you give him a 3-year deal. At 33, he's not going to be producing the same. If you get Snead on a 3-year deal, then by the time that deal is up, he's going to be 30. He can sign another big deal probably elsewhere. And then you give that money to McDuffie. And then all of a sudden that defense is keeping stud corners for the next, 6 years at that point. So I think Snead by far. Snead makes the whole rest of the defense tick. He's shut down every number one receiver he's faced this year, and he can play ultra aggressive defense too. So he's been a game wrecker. I think pay Snead first and foremost.
When's Bolton's contract up?
Next year.
Next year. Okay.
Him and Creed Humphrey. They came in 21, so they're due in 25.
Do you think they have to make any moves with the O-line?
I do, but I don't think it's Creed Humphrey. I would actually, to get into it, I would actually sign Creed Humphrey over Nick Bolton out of that draft class. Just looking at like financials, interior O-line is phenomenal. I do think that they need to get, whether they're going to move Juwan Taylor over to left tackle or draft someone or make some sort of move for a left tackle. They have to do something there, though. Donovan Smith was fine at best, but both tackles had drive killing penalties throughout the year, bunch of false starts, bunch of holding. So I don't know. I think they do need to get one of the tackles situated.
Todd is a Chicago Bears fan, diehard, for decades, and his son now has 3 Super Bowls. He's got Patrick Mahomes, and there's no signs of them slowing down. Todd, you've never had a franchise quarterback remotely close to that. The Bears are the only team in the NFL that has yet to have a 4,000-yard passer. So tell me, what are your emotions when it comes to Mahomes, the Kansas City Chiefs, and your son just living his best life right now?
So obviously, if you respect the game, you have to respect, what Mahomes is doing. I mean, if you have a problem with what he's doing, it's just like the Brady haters. It's like you aren't respecting the game. You aren't respecting football. You aren't really looking at what these guys do that's so different than anybody else. So, yeah, I mean, Mahomes is something like, I don't care what anybody says. 31 other teams want a Mahomes. I mean, he's that much different. I mean, I really do believe that he's that much different, and he's getting better. As far as Tyler, yeah, I mean, I'm happy for him. I mean, there's difficult conversations sometimes, like week 9, the Bears are 2-7. They've got a undrafted rookie free agent, Bajan as quarterback, and Tyler's like texting me complaining about, the Chiefs, I don't know what they're going to do this year. It's like, are you kidding me? Meanwhile, Green Bay's got their quarterback, and Tyler's complaining to me. It's like he's complaining he's got a scuff on his new Jordans and I'm shoeless or something. It's like 2 different worlds. But yeah, I mean, good for him. Holy crap, I wish I got to experience that.
Do you expect them to continue this dominance?
Yeah. I mean, if you look, the Patriots years, to me, there were a lot of dependence, and like, I guess to me, as long as Andy's there and Mahomes are there, I think the other pieces of the puzzle are going to fall into place. I mean, right now with Spags, they got something crazy going on the defensive side. So Mahomes, in a year where he had, I don't know, Tyler said his worst statistical season, but weapons around him were non-existent. Drop balls, did they lead the league in drop balls?
Yeah, with 40.
Yeah, so but look at what they did, and Spags, where's Spags going? Is he going to get another head coaching position? No. I mean, he's set. He's going to sit right there, and they're going to go on. I don't see what's stopping the Chiefs from going on and continuing.
And speaking of Spags, they just signed him and Dave Toub to monster extensions.
And that's the other
rewarded those guys.
Yeah, that's the other thing. You feel like Andy's really pushing to keep his guys, and no matter what, I don't care if it's Nagy or Bieniemy or whatever. That's Andy's system. That's Andy. He's going to delegate, sure, to the guys underneath him, but that's Andy.
I want to go back to the beginning of New England's dynasty, those early 2000s years. What are some similarities and some differences that you have between the Kansas City Chiefs right now and the Patriots then, Todd?
I don't know how to describe it, but I feel like everything was very, do I want to say systematic, where with the Patriots, where it was, like you had said, it was the early years were definitely helped out by the defenses, right? And you really felt like it was Belichick bringing Brady on. And there's something that's been so different about Mahomes' rise that it's almost been, the little things that he's doing are just like so bizarre and so unworldly that I don't see how you can compare it to anything we've ever seen before. I think they're their own thing. I don't really see the similarities, and I think that they're more different than they are the same, how they're going about it. I mean, other than 2 future Hall of Fame head coaches.
I don't know if you guys have checked it out. It literally just came out yesterday. I don't know if you've heard about it. And for those of you watching, but the Patriots Dynasty documentary, it's like 10-part series, I think, just dropped on Apple TV. I watched the first episode last night and it was phenomenal. Just taken back. It went back to when, like, the whole background of Drew Bledsoe, and then that year where that game against the Jets where he gets hurt and he's out. And Tyler and I were pretty young at that time. So I'm sure I know I didn't remember. I didn't even realize how aggravated Bledsoe was when that happened. Like he said, yeah, I expect to compete for my job. And it's like, damn. And Brady just had that heat on him right away. So I thought that was crazy. But I highly recommend watching that because it looks like it's going to be a phenomenal series. But Tyler, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the differences are much more than similarities. I think the biggest similarities, though, is, you take a guy like Ernie Adams for the Patriots, kind of that puppet master almost behind the scenes that doesn't get as much credit. And the Chiefs have really kind of a whole staff that's followed Andy since his Philadelphia days, that go through analytics, go through all those little fine details. So I think that's the biggest similarity, is caring about those small details that no one else in the league necessarily does, or not a lot of teams do. But that's also because they've been successful. They don't have to spend as much time reworking the offense, reworking this and that. They can spend the time on those little details. I think the biggest difference is, though, it's really, I mean, think about, especially this year, but think about like the personalities on the Chiefs. And Andy has always been a guy who's just said, let the personality shine through, let guys have fun. Versus, I mean, the Patriots, we thought Brady was a robot for the first decade of him being a starter. So I think that's honestly the biggest difference, is you see, like, when they play swag surfing and all the guys on defense are dancing on the field, and for the Chiefs, like, you never see that under a Belichick, defense. Then the only other similarity I'm really seeing is the defense. They're getting a lot of smart, really instinctual guys, your Nick Boltons, your Justin Reeds, just having that kind of extension of Spags on the field. You saw that a lot in New England with, like you said, Teddy Bruschi, Lawyer Malloy, Rodney Harrison, just guys that can kind of come back and tell, Belichick kind of what they're seeing, what their recommendations are. The Chiefs are starting to get that more and more too. But yeah, I think I agree. I think they are their own kind of entities that are just following a similar pattern.
Great point, because it just feels like you have to be buttoned up as a team. You don't win as much as the Kansas City Chiefs do without being buttoned up. But Andy does it in such a perfect way where it's still loose at the same time, where everybody loves going to work. And it's just a fun environment for those guys. And yeah, winning is fun. But we've heard over the years, guys in New England, when they were winning, it's at times still wasn't that much fun, how things were. And it was the immense pressure and expectations. And it wasn't always comfortable for players. We've heard Gronk talk about it. But with the Chiefs, it just seems like they're buttoned up and they're having the time of their lives at the same time. And that's a scary combination. That's enough about the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm sure we'll be talking plenty about them in the future. They're not, like we said, they're not going anywhere. I want to talk about this offseason coming up with you two. It's a shame Tyler's not here with us to talk about, what the Cowboys may need and what he expects. But non-draft related this offseason, which offseason story intrigues you guys the most? Tyler, go ahead.
Well, to get right back to the Chiefs, I think Chris Jones is a huge storyline if he is unrestricted free agent, kind of where he signs. But Chris Jones aside, I think the Harbaugh Chargers, what they end up doing, obviously they're going to build around Herbert, but what that staff ends up wanting to kind of make the identity of that team, I think that'll be one of the most interesting. And then I think the decisions for anyone who doesn't draft a quarterback. So, the Falcons, Steelers, those Vikings, those teams that are kind of in that middle ground that they have a vet that they could bring in, but they also need to get over the hump somehow. So whatever team ends up not, getting that first round quarterback, I think what they decide to do with a veteran quarterback is going to be most interesting. And like where Kirk Cousins lands, I think it's going to be a big piece of that too.
Todd, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things. I mean, I absolutely love free agency overall. I love the business side of it and seeing, what teams think that they need and what they actually acquire, Justin Jefferson, what's Justin Jefferson going to do? It's said that he wants to see what happens with the quarterback. T Higgins, what happens with T, I think that's a big storyline. But personally and closer to my team is, Kevin Warren and going forward with a new Bears stadium, just because I think it'd be monumental for the team, but it could also be fantastic for the city of Chicago too, to have a dome venue that, you can bring in all these big shows and possibly Super Bowl one day. And now they're looking at possibly doing it on the lakefront, which is a beautiful area. So I think it would be an absolute huge deal for them and even for the NFL.
What's your latest gut feeling right now on what your Chicago Bears are going to decide to do?
I think it depends on the time of the day and the day, I guess. But I mean, I think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that Justin's gone. I really do think that Poles is looking at what's out there, wants to put his stamp on the franchise, and I mean, I don't care. I go back to, they passed up last year. Okay. They traded down. They decided not to pick Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. And let's forget about what Bryce or CJ had done in the NFL to this point. Let's just look at their college scouting. And to be honest, they'd probably be ranked 4th and 5th in the quarterbacks this year. Right. That's just how I see it. So how do you pass up now this second year of quarterbacks? Gut feeling, I kind of see, I'm leaning towards it. They're going to take Caleb, but me, honestly, I like Drake May. I like Drake May because I've watched the tape and we're fans, right? All these writers grab the low-hanging fruit and they write about the low-hanging fruit. And believe me, Caleb has incredible arm talent. Some guys call it an elastic arm, and he's making throws and he gets that, Mahomes comparison. And some of the throws are very Mahomes-like, but that's not 100% of what makes Mahomes, right? Whereas when I watch Drake May's tape, he's the only guy who is putting stuff. He's not afraid to throw to a contested receiver. And to me, that's an NFL throw. You have to trust that your receiver is going to get it. He's fitting it in there. He's also throwing over the middle, it seems, more than what I've seen from the other prospects too. So I personally would love to see them maybe make a deal with Washington if Washington's super high on Caleb, and then maybe pick Drake. But we'll see.
I like that personally because I'm a huge Drake May fan, as you know, and not so high on Caleb, not because of his talent. The talent's obvious. Like if you watch football, you could see it. It's there. It's special. But for those people that are saying like he's the next Mahomes and all of this, I opened up the episode by talking about how I think the Chiefs are a pretty likable dynasty given how much they win because of Patrick Mahomes and the humility that he has. And that goes into the intangibles that he has as a whole, is being a quarterback and being a leader. He has so many intangibles that nobody wants to talk about. Like the fact that he kept his composure, like Tyler said, this whole season with the receivers leading the league in drops, with everything he had going on. He had that one explosion when Tony jumped off sides. But other than that, we've never seen him like so emotional that he's hurting his team. It's just been all about his team. It's never about him. He doesn't want the spotlight. He doesn't care about any of that. And you can't say like that's not even comparable to Caleb Williams. Like this kid, you could tell like his shit doesn't stink to him. I mean, it's two different egos. So those people that want to just say he's the next Mahomes, like hands down, it's gonna happen. No. There's how many guys in NFL history have we seen drafted high and they just thought like their talent alone was going to get them where they needed to go. And they were going to have a successful career in the league, just based off of that. It doesn't happen. It really doesn't. Like you need to have that drive and that as a quarterback, that leadership. And hey, if you're going to the team with the first overall pick, I know it's not the Bears pick, but the Bears, it's not, they're not top line franchise. No offense, Todd, but you know what I'm trying to say here.
It's usually not an ideal situation you're going to.
Right. So when things fall apart or when your offensive line is bad, as we saw it was last year with what Justin had to deal with, when he's getting all of this pressure thrown at him, and then you throw in, oh my God, maybe Caleb Williams is a bust. Maybe he's not as good as we thought. How is he going to deal with that pressure? I don't see him reacting the same way of like Patrick Mahomes would, and Patrick Mahomes does. So I'm not in that boat of, oh my God, he's the next Mahomes, just based off of what we saw at USC and Oklahoma. That's going to be interesting down the stretch, and we'll have more talk about the draft as it comes closer. Can't wait to get into that. But last question I have for you guys, Tyler, we'll start off with you. What team can you see that perhaps is maybe just a quarterback away right now, trading up top 5 in the draft to take a quarterback?
I mean, I think there's some low-hanging fruit. I think the Falcons are the one that come to mind for most people because they have an offense that's ready. It's just, I mean, Heineke and Ritter did not look good at all last year. I thought the play calling was terrible last year. So I kind of think the Falcons, honestly. I think that's an offense outside of the line that someone can step in and have success right away. And even, I mean, looking at like the Lions build, if you're losing games, 31-28, a young quarterback's going to do much better with that than, losing a 9-6 game or whatever the case is.
Todd, thoughts on a team trading up, and then what's your latest feeling on what the Vikings are going to do?
What the Vikings are going to do. I haven't looked into what they have, but the last I checked, their cap situation is not good. I don't think they can re-sign Kirk. I don't know if that's true or not, but from what I'm seeing, I don't think they can. Tyler mentioned the Falcons, and your question is like, who's a quarterback away? Well, if you're a quarterback away, do you really want a rookie? And the Falcons were the team that I could see Kirk going to, and I actually texted that to you the other week, Pat. Is like, am I missing something, or like, would that not be the team that just goes all in to try to land Cousins? Because you throw Cousins in with what Atlanta's got going on, and I think in that division, I think they're automatically probably going to take the division. As far as a team trading up, it might be a quarterback away. It's tough because where are they going? The first team that might trade out. So you got the Bears. They're not going to trade out of the top. So if you say 3 quarterbacks are the top 3 guys, they're not going to trade out of the top 3. Commanders aren't going to trade out of the top 3. I don't see New England trading out of the top 3. Arizona's not going to pass up, Marvin Harrison Jr. at that point if he's sitting there. So you'd say the Chargers at 5 are the first team that might trade back to a quarterback needy team, but then it's probably the 4th quarterback. So you got the Giants. Would the Giants possibly make a move? I think it would probably be somebody more along the lines trying to jump up like Raiders at 13. I think that they'd be the ones who are going to try to take that second tier of quarterback, because I think by that point the first tier is gone.
I think the Raiders, I'm glad you brought them up. I think the Raiders have to do something because you're not competing in that division. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't care. It's a feel-good story. Like AP got that team going. Defense played great down the stretch, but you need a quarterback or you're not going to have a chance in that division. So I think that's a team it's going to be interesting to look out for. I think the Steelers is going to be interesting to see if they want to move off Kenny. But they just feel like everything is so stale in Pittsburgh. They're like, all right, we're just going to roll it out. We're going to roll it out with Kenny Pickett for another season.
Fields.
You think so?
I think that, to me, the Falcons are the Cousins spot, and I think the Steelers are the Field spot. I really, really do.
I like that a lot. Another team to look out for, Seattle Seahawks. Thoughts on the Seahawks?
Well, I mean, they ain't called back. I mean, they're running with Geno again now that they add somebody else. I don't know. What's Tampa Bay do? They're sitting way back there at 26. I mean, we assume we know what they're going to do. But, Broncos, I don't know. I mean, these are teams that are sitting back a little bit, and we just don't know how far can they reach, and how interested are they in making a trade or going after a free agent? I don't know.
And I think the most interesting is that second tier quarterback too. So you're looking at what JJ, Bo Nix, or Michael Penix.
Right.
All 3 of them are probably going to get graded out as late first, early second.
Mm-hmm.
When have we seen a second round quarterback really succeed recently? So all those teams, I feel like Kenny Pickett and Bo Nix, I love Bo, but I think they're not that far off from each other. So I just don't see that being a big jump for 2 older quarterbacks coming out of college.
And that's why I'm saying where the Steelers are sitting, back at 20, I think that they have to. I think their hands forced to do something like with a Justin Fields trade or whatever. If that's like I'm picturing a 2nd and a 5th or something like that. I think that makes complete sense to them. You can't come back with Kenny Pickett and think that you're going to get something like a new product. I mean, it's going to be the same product as last year.
The Chargers, they could trade back because there's going to be teams calling for that number 5 pick. But does Brock Bowers not fit perfectly for the Chargers right now and what they need? I think that's a great player for Jim Harbaugh. I really do.
I think they can get him after 5, though. I mean, I don't think you have to stand pat at 5 in order to get Brock Bowers.
You think a team's going to their team's going to come up to take a quarterback at 5 is what you're saying?
I think quarterback and wide receiver. Yeah.
But then the question becomes, put Brock Bauer in the wide receiver, rankings. I think he's probably 2 or 3 out of that bunch. So all of a sudden, I mean, you might have to jump it to top 8, I would think.
I'd say I think top 8, but I think that you could move out of the top 5 in order to, and still keep them. I think I wouldn't go far. Like you said, top 8. That sounds about right.
Besides quarterback, anything else that's intriguing you guys about the draft?
I think
it's pretty early right now. I know.
Yeah, I think the running back class is actually kind of interesting because I don't think anyone's going to go in the first round, but I think that 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round is going to be a run of really good running backs. And I think, someone like a Bucky Irving or, there's a lot of good names that you can get on that 2nd and 3rd day. And I think there's a few teams that are just going to load up on them. So I think the running back class is deep, but doesn't have that, top tier Jahmyr Gibbs or whoever at that point. So I think there's some kind of diamonds in the rough there in that 2nd and 3rd day.
Yeah, I think depth at wide receiver in this draft is impressive. I think there's some edge talent, you're looking at these 2nd round guys that are going to play critical roles on their team, and going back to the Bears, I think that's why I just get a feeling that Ryan Poles is going to do whatever it takes to get a second rounder in this draft, because right now we don't have one because of the Sweat trade. So I think he's going to try to get one because there's just too much talent that's going to be sitting there in round 2.
Can't wait for that, for draft season to be coming up. We're gonna have a blast getting into some draft talk on the podcast. But gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me today. Talk some NFL. Tyler, congratulations once again to Kansas City Chiefs.
Appreciate it.
I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks again for coming on.
All right, Pat.
Yeah. Thanks. Good to see you guys.
That's it.
Appreciate Todd and Tyler coming on, talking some Super Bowl recap, NFL offseason talk. Can't wait to have them back on as draft season approaches. Once we get closer to April, we'll have mock drafts. We're really going to dive into it. We'll start talking about that again soon. But that's it. That's it for the NFL here for a minute. It's a great season. Sad that it's over, but we got plenty of other topics to discuss. And one of those topics is going to be hockey going forward. So let's dive into our NHL segment. First half of the season recap. Joining me now for our NHL segment is my good friend, Adam Rude. Adam, how we doing, buddy?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, man, I appreciate you coming on. If there is one person in this world who is responsible for getting me into hockey, it is you. So there's nobody else that I would have on this segment with me. I was in high school, was just all NBA in the winter, waiting for baseball. It was just football, basketball, baseball. Yep. And this dude introduced me to hockey. I got into it a little bit. That's when it started. And then once I got stationed in Alaska, it being the only sport there, my love for hockey just completely took off. And it helped that it was the prime of Sidney Crosby's career, winning back-to-back rings. So
you had to bring up Crosby. You just had to.
That was the golden age. That was the golden age of my hockey life right then and there. It's not as fun as it once was, but like I said, the one person responsible for me being in hockey, being a hockey fan, it is you. So thank you for coming on. I know I'm just kind of going to get out of the way because it's been heavy NFL for me, like it always is. That's all we've talked about on this podcast. And then this episode, we're diving into NHL and NBA for the first time. So I know you're a lot more on it than I am. I'm going to initiate, and then I'm just going to kind of let you run away with it. Starting off, Adam is a New Jersey Devils fan. So Adam, tell us, he's from where I'm from, upstate New York. How the hell did you become a New Jersey Devils fan?
Well, I mean, similar to the Buffalo Bills, I'm 100% certain that city's cursed. They're never going to win a championship. It's a dumpster fire of a hockey team. It's a dumpster fire of an NFL team. But I remember, I think I was like 5 or 6 years old. We got our first computer in the house. It had a demo version of NHL on it. You could play 2 teams. You could be the Avalanche or the Devils. And I remember my mom used to call me a little freaking devil because I was so wild. I picked the Devils, and it's been them ever since.
Why hockey? Why did you love hockey as a young kid?
I don't know. Something about the game drew me to it. The flow of the game, the speed of the game. Factor in that fighting was more prevalent back in those days. It combined a little bit of everything. It was like, you got the flow of basketball, the violence of football, and they got knives on their feet. So it was just the perfect mix of everything for me.
Love it. So let's get into where the NHL is at right now. We talked a little bit about how the game was then, and one thing for sure is it's definitely more of a skill-based game now. We don't have these goons out on these rosters who, hey, you're here just to fight and fuck shit up on the ice. Essentially, it's more of a speed and skill-based game right now. But the NHL as a whole, I feel, has just exploded these last couple of years. That deal with ESPN was huge. Now they're getting the broadcasts on TNT. It's going NBA, NHL, NBA, NHL. I love it throughout the week that we're not just getting basketball forced down our throats now, and we get a little variety, and hockey is getting the love and the shine that it deserves. Generally, the state of the NHL right now, what are your thoughts?
Not great, honestly. I brought some notes. Honestly, I got to keep myself on track. There's so much I could go down rabbit holes with hockey. I could talk hours on end.
Would you agree? Would you agree with that though, of the fact that they've gained a lot more following, first of all, and it's more of a skill-based game now?
100% skill-based game. The enforcer breed is dying off. I think Ryan Reeves, Tom Wilson's kind of a hybrid, but Ryan Reeves is kind of the last remaining of the gladiators, and it's 100% skill based. You see a lot of the smaller guys succeeding, and they don't need the protection like they used to. Like Gretzky had McSorley always following him around, but like Jack Hughes, maybe $175. He doesn't need the protection anymore. Last night, I was watching the game against the Kings. He took an elbow to the head. There was nobody stepping up, beating the crap out of the guy who elbowed him in the head. It was just Hughes chirping the guy. Whereas back in the day, that would have been an immediate gloves off fight and all that. As far as viewership goes, a study last year came out, showed that the NHL actually had a decline in viewership, but they're expanding the platforms, hoping to kind of reach a new base. Under Bettman's tenure, I think the NHL is kind of losing its touch, to be honest. He's got a huge hard-on for Arizona. I don't know why he's trying to keep it in Arizona. They're playing in a college hockey stadium right now, and Quebec wants their team back, but they don't even get a chance. We're expanding to Salt Lake City. I think that came out same day that they announced several players in the NHL were going on leaves of absence for the whole Team Canada issue, which I'm sure we'll get into. But I don't think the NHL is in the state people want it to be in right now.
I would disagree with you on that. Your tone with Salt Lake City, those fans are phenomenal, and they don't have anything else out there. They got the Jazz, and they happen to sell out every game, and it's always electric. So my opinion, even if it's Arizona moving to Salt Lake City, if you're going to get rid of them, like that's a great city to have a hockey team. I already know it's going to be rowdy. Is it too lenient? Are we giving these teams like too easy of a setup when we put them in the league? Is it too easy for them to become great?
So I'll circle back to, I just want to say real quick, I wasn't throwing shade at Salt Lake City. They definitely deserve an expansion franchise. I'm just saying, as far as Arizona goes, like we can expand to another team because the NHL is all about expansion, but Arizona needs to go and Quebec needs to get a team back. Canada needs more teams. That being said, as far as the expansion draft goes, I don't think we're being too lenient. There's not a whole lot to choose from. It's all about choosing right and making the trades so that like Vegas made so many trades so that certain players weren't selected. They just made the right trades and the right picks. The Kraken, they're kind of, they had an okay draft. They didn't have a great draft, and they don't have a great team. They're kind of middle of the pack right now. They drafted heavy on defense. They had a couple missed picks. So I think the expansion draft perimeters are pretty fair set up.
It's just hard. It's just crazy to think about. Thinking back to the last time the NFL expanded in the Houston Texans and how bad they were. It just felt like they had no chance for so long in the league. And Vegas has already won a cup since the time that they've been in. So crazy to think about.
With Vegas, you gotta think they made a lot of good moves. They got Fleury, and Pittsburgh thought he was done with his peak, but he wasn't. And they went out, they got Jack Eichel when Buffalo thought he was just a problem, a head case, but it turns out like Jack Eichel just needed the surgery. That was it. The only reason he wanted out of Buffalo is because they wouldn't let him get the surgery he needed. Then he got the surgery and he came back with Vegas. He goes out, he performs, they win a cup. Vegas just has great management. They're a fantastic team. They're going to be a powerhouse for years to come.
Do you think it fixes the problem if Arizona just builds an arena for the hockey team, or have them play where the Phoenix Suns play?
Honestly, I don't. I don't see the
Because I love
market in
Arizona personally. I love it.
I mean, Arizona is a great state. It's beautiful, but I think the market for hockey is just not there. If it was, Austin Matthews would be planning to go right back to Arizona as soon as his contract's up with the Leafs, but that's never going to happen.
From there, yeah.
Yep.
You think that having a player like him from there, that would do something to, kind of jolt that city's interest for hockey, but it just hasn't happened. It's unfortunate. Talking about some hot streaks, cold streaks going on right now in the league, I want to talk about the Eastern Conference specifically. Who do you like in that conference, and what are your thoughts on some teams skidding right now, some teams getting hot?
Well, it hurts me so much to my very core to say that the Rangers are hot. I mean, there's you can't be biased when you're doing sports talk. That's just how it is. You gotta be the bigger person when it comes to it. But they're a great team. They've got some good defensive players. Adam Fox is a stud. Artemi Panarin's finally stepping up. I know he's had some hot and cold streaks. Kreider's always good on the power play. Ironically, Shesterkin, their beacon of hope through all of this, their stud goalie, he's having a down year, which even for him, a down year is not that bad. But they get an aging Jonathan Quick who got ran out of Vegas so quick. Pun intended, LOL. He's the better goalie this year. So it's like they can't seem to lose. They're on a 6-game win streak. They're tearing up the East. They're going to coast into the playoffs. It's going to be up to them whether or not they have another failure like they did last year against the Devils. They've had a history of choking in the playoffs. I think honestly, they have a pretty good shot of this being the year, but they're approaching a bubble to where they're going to have to retool 100%. Because, Panarin's aging, Kreider's aging, Zibanejad's aging. Quick probably can't maintain this pace for another 2 to 3 years. So there's some things to figure out down the stretch for them. As far as Boston goes, what they're doing now is kind of what everyone expected them to do at the beginning of the season after they lost, Bergeron and Krejci. They just kind of surprised everyone coming out the way they did. So, they're hit or miss. They could figure it out. We don't know yet. But my personal pick, the team I think is going to go straight to the cup, is going to be the Florida Panthers. They're the perfect team on paper. Bobrovsky had a couple down years. He signed that huge contract in Florida, and then everyone's labeling him as a bust. He has a couple bad years. Then he has this miraculous resurgence last year in the playoffs. Takes them all the way to the cup final where they unfortunately lose. But if you look at that team, they're nasty. They got grit. They've got scoring. They've got everything you could possibly want. Tkachuk is one of the best players in the NHL. I love the way he plays. Physical, hard, nasty, and he has a scoring touch. They got Reinhart out of Buffalo. The guy's a power play merchant. I think he's right behind Matthews in goals right now. So mid-season picks, it's definitely the Panthers for me in the East.
And that was a team I forgot to throw in there in conversation is Toronto, because you talk about the Rangers and how they typically, they've been choking in the playoffs. Well, the Maple Leafs are the biggest choke artist.
Yes.
It's not even a debate.
100%.
So is it like, if they don't get it done this year, like if this happens again where they fail to win in the playoffs, when does it get to be a point where it's just time to blow it up in Toronto?
I think they've hit a hot streak, but I think it's just that. It's just a streak. Toronto's not a team that's built to last. They've got so much money invested in their core, but outside of that, it's such a weak team, and I don't see them getting over the hump and making it to the cup. They would have to just be hot at the right time, which it's happened in the past. We'll give it to some teams. But I just don't think Toronto has it in them. I don't think anybody on that team can come through in the clutch, and they've proven that over and over again. So, I mean, I honestly think some people need to get moved.
Yeah, speaking of, what are your predictions for this trade deadline coming up?
I, I don't know. I don't have anything for you, honestly. As far as the trade deadline goes, it's a nightmare right now. I mean, two big pieces already got moved. We got Lindholm and Kuzmenko. Calgary and Vancouver swapped them up. But right now, it seems to be everybody needs goaltending. And the goaltending that's out there really isn't that great. But the fact that there's such a limited market for goaltending, these teams are demanding so much. And I just don't know who's going to get, pulled to where. I know the Devils they were trying to acquire Markstrom. Calgary wanted an arm and a leg. And as soon as the Devils were like, deal's done, let's go, we just need you to retain some salary for us, Calgary was like, no. They're anti-retaining salary. But I mean, come on, we're basically mortgaging the future to get an aging goaltender off your roster, and you can't take a couple million salary for us for a couple years.
It's the same thing with Fleury too. Fleury being is as old as Fleury is, he's going to demand that because it's supply and demand right now.
100%. And honestly, I wish the Devils would go after Fleury over Markstrom. 100%. Markstrom, they're going to ask for too much for Markstrom, and I'm not willing to give it up if I'm a Devils general manager.
So how do you feel about are they a goalie away, or are they too far out of it, do you think, to make a run this year?
It's going to kill me to say this. I think they need to sit tight. It's a tough situation with Lindy Ruff's contract. I don't think he's the coach for the Devils. I think he's been a perennial loser his whole life. He's been on all these good teams. He's won Coach of the Year a few times, but he's never won the Stanley Cup. And I don't think his system's working for the Devils right now. They were Stanley Cup favorites when the season started. And they've had injuries, but they had the players to fill it in. It's just I don't think his system's working for them. But I don't want to speak too soon because these past few games that they've been playing, the goaltending's been there, the defense is working together, the forwards are, helping on the back check. So it's possible they can make a run, but I don't want them to mortgage the future just because it's possible to make a run. It's like I think the number one piece on the trade block for the Devils is Alexander Holtz. And I don't know why. Lindy Ruff has treated him like the Antichrist all year. He's decimated his minutes. He's barely given him any time. The kid's got a mean shot. He's trying hard out there. But he gives guys like Andre Palat ice time, and Palat's worse than Holtz. So I think the Devils need to sit tight, accept your fate this year, fire Ruff in the offseason, and regroup. It's a lot easier to get a trade done in the offseason when you got all that time and you get closer to the draft. And teams get antsy for draft picks than it is to, we need a goalie now right before the trade deadline.
Before we dive into the Western Conference, I just want to talk about my Pittsburgh Penguins for a little bit. And I think this year has just been so pathetic. We had like one run where we rung off a couple wins in a row, and I was like, all right, this is the point. We're going to turn it around. And then we just started playing shitty again. And roster is aging, but
Yeah.
Crosby is still incredible. Every single night, he's still so good out there on the ice. It's a shame to see the team being what it is right now. It's a mess. What are your thoughts on my Penguins?
I think you guys are dead in the water. You got Kyle Dubas as your general manager. He got run out of Toronto, and for good reason. He made a lot of stupid moves. He overpaid for a lot of players. He invested in the wrong players. He held on to Hull, thinking he was going to be a top 4 defenseman. He let McCann go. McCann goes to Seattle and scores 40 goals. Like, he's just not a good general manager. What does he do when he gets to Pittsburgh? He goes out and he gets Erik Karlsson. You don't need Erik Karlsson. He's eating a significant portion of the cap. And to be honest, he's not even really a defenseman. Yeah, the guy won the Norris, but he doesn't play defense. He's a scoring defenseman, which that brings me to a little sidebar. It just boggles my mind that when they vote on the Norris, they only look at the points that defensemen are scoring. That's not what it is. It's the best defenseman.
Right.
But, you're scoring points as a defenseman, you're going to win the Norris. So, yeah, Quinn Hughes is going to win the Norris this year. But
That's a
Erik
great
Karlsson's-
point. Why are we paying attention to points?
Yeah, maybe assists, but like when you're looking at Norris, like trophy voting, the biggest stat, and it's one of the most overlooked stats in the NHL, is plus minus. If you're plus 58, that means you were on the ice 58 more times for goals for your team than you were when they were scored against you. It's a huge stat, but it gets overlooked because so many goals are scored now. The Penguins, they really kind of screwed themselves. Like, I appreciate what they did. Everyone appreciates what they did. We're gonna keep Malkin, we're gonna keep Crosby, we're gonna keep Letang. Everyone loves that. They want to see them retire a Penguin. But it's just not good for winning. You're going to screw your team long term. To be honest, Gensel shouldn't be traded. Gensel's your future. He's young enough to where he can step in and be. I don't want to say fill Crosby's shoes because it's impossible to fill Crosby's shoes, and that kills me because I've hated him his whole career. But he's one of the greatest players ever. You can't deny it. Gensel should be next in line. He should be staying. Malkin, Letang, they should be going. And you should bring in better pieces. And this will never happen because it'll shock the NHL. I think Crosby needs to get out of Pittsburgh. He deserves a shot on a contender somewhere else where he can go out and actually compete for something instead of playing on a dead fish team. It would break everyone's heart, honestly. I've hated the guy, and I don't want to see him wear anything other than a Pittsburgh sweater. But he doesn't deserve what he's getting in Pittsburgh. And it kills everybody else who's watching this because he's playing like prime Crosby right now, whereas Ovechkin's falling off. Right. He's just getting better.
Right, and we brought in Dubas from Toronto, and now all of our guys we let go are thriving in Vancouver. So I want to transition to the Western Conference. Vancouver is tearing it up right now. From what they were to what they are now, it's incredible, the turnaround that they've had. So let's talk about Vancouver right now. The top of the West is Vancouver, Dallas, Colorado, and then you got Winnipeg, Vegas, Edmonton. I want to talk about Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers as well. But right now, which team in the West has really impressed you the first half of the season?
Vancouver, 100%. I didn't see it coming. Vancouver, they've had a history. They have cheap ownership. They do not like to pay players. They sent their captain, their pride and joy, Bo Horvat, to the Islanders because they didn't want to extend his contract. And I'm pretty sure the same thing's coming with Pettersson, which would absolutely break the Canucks franchise. He's a stud. He needs to stay. They got to pay him. It is what it is. But the ownership's cheap in Vancouver. But they, as far as general managers and coaches go, they've got a great staff up there, and they draft well. They put together and develop prospects amazingly. They're a great organization. I feel like if they had more financial backing, like say the Rangers do with James Dolan, they would be a dominant team year in and year out. But for now, like they need to make a run. Either they have to get to the Western Conference Finals, or they got to get to the Stanley Cup and win it before ownership's going to invest in this, because they just want to make money. They don't care about winning. They want to make money. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day for Vancouver's ownership.
Which team in the West has been a disappointment so far?
Los Angeles. I feel like they were developing pretty good. They had a hot streak to start the season, and everything was going according to plan. But then, they had a pretty solid skid. The other night they lost 7-0 to Buffalo, which is kind of like the epitome of the season. I'll give them credit. They did rebound pretty well against my Devils last night. They came out, they switched their system. They played the 1-3-1. The Devils attack with speed. That's their main focus. So the 1-3-1 really breaks up the speed and the breakouts through the neutral zone. So they shut them down pretty good. So I mean, if they can make adjustments like that going forward instead of just after a huge loss, they might be able to rebound. But for now, it's been a pretty big surprise that they're where they are. They should be leading a division, not fighting for a wild card spot.
I want to talk about Connor McDavid in Edmonton
McJesus.
because, right, unbelievable player. But as a team, they haven't done anything, in the postseason since he's gotten there. It's just been letdown after letdown each postseason. They fired their coach once again earlier this season and then immediately went on a run and got really, really hot. And then got beat by Vegas to end their streak. But they were on an absolute tear. McDavid, Draisaitl.
They're a wild card because they're either on or they're not. I mean McDavid and Draisaitl, they're always on. They're always great, but the rest of that team is so mediocre, it's not even funny. They've got a lot of money tied up in 3 superstars between McDavid, Draisaitl, and Darnell Nurse. Darnell Nurse was he was an unfortunate miss because he's just not playing at the level of his salary right now, and it's really hurting the team. Their goaltending's been weak. I mean, I think they've sent a $5 million goalie down to the minor leagues, which is unheard of. He cleared waivers. No one wanted him. He played like crap in the minor leagues. Goaltending's going to be a killer for them in the playoffs. They got to figure it out. Either they need to trade for a goalie or they need to get their goalies making some saves. But
am I tripping, or is this every year with them? It's the goalie continuing to let them down. So why do they continue with this generational talent? Why do you keep going year after year after year without doing something about your goalie situation?
They can't afford it. McDavid is getting paid what McDavid deserves. Draisaitl, honestly, I mean, he's not the playmaker. He doesn't have the speed and assist ability that McDavid does, but he scores a lot of goals. He's a 50-plus goal scorer, so he's going to get paid on the same level as McDavid, and that's top 5 in the NHL money. And from there, you can't afford to spend elsewhere. I feel honestly, for them to get a good goalie, they're going to have to give up some serious draft picks. They're going to have to get rid of Darnell Nurse somehow. They're going to have to get someone to bite his contract. And their best option is probably to go after UC Saros in Nashville. I don't know why Nashville's shopping him. He's a phenomenal goalie. Everyone's after him, but he's going to cost the most. I feel if there's a goalie trade as far as trade deadline goes and Saros gets moved, he's going to cost the most, and he should. But if Edmonton wants to win a cup, they should give up everything for him. 100%.
All right, talking about goalies, if it was a must-win situation, you had to win, we're talking game 7 of the cup final. You could have any goalie in the league. Who would you start in net?
That would be prime Dominic Hasek from back in the day. But unfortunately, since he's pushing 50, that's so tough. That's so tough. I mean, Aiden Hill's playing great this year, but I don't think he can maintain that. You don't want to rely solely on the track record. I'm not paying you for the player that you are. I'm playing for the player that you are. I'd probably say Connor Hellebuck out of Winnipeg. He was rumored to come to New Jersey in the offseason. They should have pulled the trigger when they had the chance, but then he re-signed in Winnipeg. He's having a pretty good year. I think he's got the second best numbers this year. So I would say him. He's all reliable. I'm willing to risk it with him. As long as I got a solid defense in front of him, 100% Connor Hellebuck.
Before I get into your prediction for the West, I want to talk about one team who is somebody on this podcast's favorite team that isn't here right now, and that is Tyler. What do you think about his Dallas Stars this season? They're having a great season so far. Can this team make a run?
Anybody can make a run. That's the beauty of the NHL. Anybody can make a run. Last year for Florida to get in, it took so many factors. I think the Penguins had to lose to one of the worst teams in Chicago. and the Panthers had to win, and then they somehow squeaked in just barely into the playoffs, and then they beat the most dominant team in NHL regular season history with the Bruins, and they mauled through the East, and somehow they made it to the Cup final. Unfortunately, they lost. They put up a good fight, but anybody can win. As far as Dallas goes, yeah, I mean they're in that category. I don't think they're overly dominant. They're a great team, but I wouldn't pick them as like, yeah, I'm feeling really good that they can win, but they could definitely get hot at the right time and win. But they're running out of time, 100%. You know, Ben's getting older. Sagan's getting older. He's not performing at the level of his salary. Heiskanen's been hurt a lot. So, I mean, maybe a couple moves here or there, they could do it. They have great goaltending, which is hard to find. Jake Ottinger's a great goaltender. He's a good playoff goalie. So they could definitely do it. It's just right moves, right time.
Yeah, he got ridiculously hot in the playoffs last year. That was fun to watch. Western Conference, you got the Florida Panthers coming out of the East, and we're obviously going to have you on again before the playoffs start. But right now, who's your team coming out of the West?
It's got to be Vancouver right now. All signs point to Vancouver. The NHL's been due for a Canadian team to win it, so I would say they're a strong favorite. I would absolutely love, probably my second choice is going to be Edmonton. You know, I feel, especially with that 16-game win streak, I think they found a lot of flaws in their game defensively, offensively. I think as long as they're on the same page defensively, I feel like they can survive with mediocre goaltending. That's what the Devils did last year. Vitek Vanacek, mediocre goalie. It's shown this year when the defense has been flawed. You know, we lost a couple pieces. We got a lot of young kids there. So mistakes are happening, and Vitek's looked like garbage on New Jersey. So I think Edmonton's figured it out a lot defensively. I feel like they can get away with average goaltending. It might be a shootout, so it could either be Edmonton or Vancouver coming out of the West right now if I had to pick one.
What are your thoughts on what you've seen so far in this early career of the next one, Connor Bedard?
I mean, I feel like he's going through it. And, you know, are we allowed to swear on here?
Oh yeah.
Okay, good. That movie, The Campaign, with Will Ferrell and Zach Galifianakis. I feel like it's one of those things where it's like, welcome to the fucking show. Like he has all these flashy moves, and now he's got to the NHL. He sees it's a lot harder, and the hits hurt a lot worse, and you can't get away with those dipsy doodle moves. He's got all the skills. He's gonna do just fine. I mean, he's a fucking stud when it comes down to it. At the end of the day, he got a shit rocked against the Devils. You know, he kept his head down. It was a clean hit. Even he said it. His coach said it. He broke his jaw. You just got to learn from it and move on. But his wrist shot's so nasty. His vision on the ice is ridiculous. Like, he's everything he was cracked up to be. His first year is gonna suck. You know, he may or may not win Rookie of the Year, but he'll break out of his shell by year 2 or 3. Same thing happened to Jack Hughes and Connor McDavid. They had injuries and shitty first years, and then look what happens now. They're both studs, so he'll be fine. He's a stud.
On a more negative topic, this is a story that you brought up to me. I didn't even know anything about it. This Team Canada incident that went on. We got some players that are in the NHL now that are being charged. Tell myself and the people about what's going on right now.
It's a disgusting topic. I wish this never happened. So essentially, 2018, the World Juniors tournament, Team Canada won gold. They had a gala in London, I believe, and several players went to this golf tournament. They were at a bar, and one of players, you know, the police report came out. It said John Doe, so they listed him by number, not by name. John Doe 1 started talking to this female, and they were giving her drinks. She was getting drunk. She agreed to go back to the hotel with him where they had consensual sexual activity. And then preceding that, he sent out a group text message to his boys and invited what the victims stated was 8 players. Only 5 have been charged, but she said 8 players were involved. And then they participated in what was deemed to be a gang rape because she was too drunk to consent and she felt pressured that she couldn't leave. She said players brought in golf clubs. They made her take a shower and on video state that she was sober for the events. And then John Doe 1, after she went to the police, said, you need to make this all go away. Again, this is all alleged. I don't want to speculate. This is just what's come out in news articles. You can read this online. And now it's finally come to the point where they're getting charged. Initially, the police failed to file charges. Team Canada covered it up. That was one of the big issues that everyone's been having lately. And then it came out that she was seeking damages for it. And the police reopened the investigation. They issued charges, gave the players time to surrender, and now they're on paid leaves of absence from their team.
Yeah, like you said, it's just sickening. They right now it's just the allegations and everything, but usually when there's smoke, there's fire when it comes to these things, and that's rough. It's going to be interesting. Paid leave of absence is interesting too. That's.
I mean, I think that's kind of a technicality. I feel like they will end up, like, if it's found that they were involved after the trial, I feel like they're going to have to forfeit their salary because of the morality clause. But for, contract and legal reasons, they're getting paid right now. It definitely hits close to home because 2 of my Devils are on that team. And, that's kind of why I have a rocky relationship with the Devils right now, is because everyone knew about these names and these investigations on this list for several years now. But my general manager went out and re-signed one of the players and then got another in free agency. And he brought in 2 potential rapists to my team, which ironically, about a week before the names got released, I met one of them. So that was great.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy times.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy world to be in. Well, Adam, I appreciate your time coming on, talking some hockey with me. We will be sure to have you on when Tyler's back and, the NHL at second half of the season really starts to heat up as playoffs come. We will be sure to check in with you, see where you're at that time, and get some predictions from you. But thanks again, man. It was great catching up with you, and I'll talk to you soon. Have a good night.
Sounds good, man. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
I want to thank Adam for coming on once again. It was a blast talking some hockey, going through the first half of this season. We'll be sure to have him back on as the NHL season continues. Coming up next, we're going to dive into the first half of the NBA season. Stay tuned. Joining me now to talk some NBA hoops is my good friend, Matt Seeger. Seeger, how are we doing?
Doing okay, Patrick. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. Just got off the line with Adam Rude, talked some NHL first half of the season. Now I'm diving in with you, talking some NBA. This is a great time. Great time to be alive. Even though football season's over, we still got something to look forward to. So I'm excited to talk some NBA with you. Let's start it off with something that happened this season that happened in the NBA for the first time this season, NBA in-season tournament. There were a lot of critics, skepticism, beginning, myself included. I thought it was ridiculous. You needed to have something to get these guys motivated to play. But it turned out being – I'm going to let you – what are your thoughts on it?
It's kind of a good and a bad. We're kind of taking more of a Euro approach to it because that's a Euro thing. There's a lot of different leagues in Europe that do in-season tournaments or beginning season tournaments, and we kind of adapted to that. I'm not necessarily a huge fan on it because obviously I'm a Knicks fan. The Knicks this year are going to have to play the Bucks 5 times in the regular season. If they didn't have the in-season tournament, that wouldn't be a thing. However, I do like it for a lot of the younger players, guys that are on two-way contracts that are maybe just trying to get a foothold in the league. This tournament, if their team wins it, that's a big payday for them. $500,000 per player, that's big.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Those guys that are on the fringe and, don't have a guaranteed job every day. But part of that, part of the reason why that was implemented was to get these guys to play. And now we have the rule where you got to play 65 games a season to be considered for these awards at the end of the season. Do you think that rule is going to help things? Do you think players really care about awards? Obviously, everybody wants to win an MVP, but besides that, do you think these guys care a lot where that really matters to them? And also, do you think load management is here to stay in the NBA?
I think the awards really do matter to the players. The reason why I say that is because you find guys at the end of the year, they have incentives. Hey, make first team, make all rookie, make all defensive team. Those are important to a lot of guys, especially guys who are trying to maybe get that next contract that maybe they weren't on a big rookie deal, but maybe they're trying to make themselves a max player. This helps them trying to get onto those teams. The 65 game rule, it can hurt. We can see what happened with Embid this year. I'm sure we'll probably point on that later. But with him being out and not being able to play 65 games, that pulls him from the MVP race. I like that personally because the MVP race is supposed to be the most valuable player, not the most valuable player when you're playing. You're supposed to be playing basketball. Yes, injuries happen and it's unfortunate, but at the same time, you shouldn't really be getting an award if you've only played 47 games compared to a guy who's outworked and maybe only missed 2 games the whole season. So that's kind of my take on that. With load management, I think this 65 game rule is really going to help with it. Because, I mean, if we're thinking about it, they can't really miss that many games. And if you're a team that's possibly got a chance to go really, really far, do you really want to hurt your player and maybe take some stuff away from him just by sitting him? I mean, that could cause a little bit of division with the players and the coaches. I think maybe towards down the end of the line, if there's players that have a gap that maybe I'm just going to use a player off the top of my head, Luka. He's got 8 games left that he can miss before he's ineligible for postseason stuff. Let's say he's still got 8 games left and there's 2-3 games in the season. They're locked up. They're not in a play-in. I could see Luka sitting. But other than that, I think it's pretty much gone. At least I hope so.
Tell me about when you really started liking the New York Knicks.
So I was actually a small child when I started watching the Knicks. Didn't even realize I was really watching the Knicks. Kind of fell off until probably 2007. And then I started watching it basically religiously from 2011 on. Ever since Melo got to New York. Melo's my favorite player since, he was in college. I mean, he went to Syracuse University. And I've been following the Knicks ever since. It's been a heck of a drought. I haven't been to the finals since '99. Championships 71 and 73, way before I was born. So here's hoping. It's looking good. These Knicks right now are definitely surging.
It's been a complete resurgence with Jalen Brunson and how he's just exploded this season, making the All-Star team. He's special to watch. And even with the Randall injury, this team is, stuck together. The OG trade was big. They just took off immediately after that. So I want to ask you about your thoughts on that trade with Toronto. Looking back at it, I have never been a huge fan of RJ Barrett. You know that about me, but I do love Quickly. So I thought it was tough losing him. But looking back at that trade and, if Randall comes back 100% this season, is this team a serious contender? Can this team hang with, Boston and Philly if they're healthy and Milwaukee in the playoffs? Can they make a serious run? Non-biased opinion.
So to take your point on the trade that you mentioned, there were a couple other moves that have happened since then. There was a trade that happened where Quentin Grimes and Evan Fournier, they all left. We got Bojan Bogdanovic. I totally mispronounced his name, but that happens. We got him back, and we also got Alec Burks, who was a Knick before. I think that also helps us a lot in depth. Really shows that we're going to put Miles McBride in a pressure situation off our bench. I think that if OG Anunoby can get back healthy, because he's out for 3 weeks right now also, him and Randall are huge. If all 5 of the starters are healthy going into the playoffs, I feel like the Knicks can definitely make a deep run. Boston's going to be tough, but I feel like we could take Boston in a 7-game series. I feel like we've got the toughness to do it, and we've got the defense to do it. Mitch not being healthy is a question mark, but there's
Never
hope
is.
because we've been playing great basketball this year, and he's been out 90% of the year already. So if he comes back, it's probably not going to hurt.
Hartenstein's been pleasant surprise too. I think that that dude has played some really good basketball, and now he's hurt, right?
Yep, he's hurt right now. He's been kind of on and off for the last couple weeks. We've just been hitting a plague of injuries going into the All-Star break. Fortunately, we're in a good position seating wise that shouldn't be a problem, but we'll see where we are in 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, the Knicks aren't doing too hot in February right now. There's not as many games, but still, it's not a great stretch to be on before you go into a break. So we'll see what happens before Randall and before OG come back.
That is a fun team to watch. Just being, I don't have an NBA team. The Knicks are an easy team to root for. Like when the Knicks are good, I feel like that's so good for the league. And the Garden being electric, it's a fun team to watch. Especially the way Jalen Brunson's been playing this season. But we talked about the OG trade. Going back to that trade deadline, though, what is your biggest takeaway from it?
Wasn't anything crazy like there was last year. I mean, you saw teams trying to move around a little bit, trying to get better. There were a couple that kind of popped, but nothing really went bang, if you know what I mean. Teams just trying to add depth. There were a couple players that I feel like should have gotten moved and didn't. One of them was D'Angelo Russell. I thought that he was definitely going to get moved just because he was playing really, really well. He had great value, and the Lakers are not looking great right now. Let's be real. They're going to lose LeBron at the end of the year because he's already stated multiple times he wants to play with his son. The Lakers are in like a just outside the lottery purgatory right now. So they need to kind of fix what's going on. And I felt like even though D'Angelo's playing well, he would have gotten traded just to kind of bring that roster up. And he didn't. He's still a Laker.
Gordon Hayward to OKC, I liked a lot for that team because I've fallen in love with that young core in OKC. Gilgeous-Alexander might be, John Morant's probably my favorite player in the league right now, even though he's not playing. Since he's not playing, it's been SGA this season. I just think he is special, and they have so much young talent around. I'm seeing Chet play this year now. It's been I honestly I have a crush on that team. Like low key, I'm a closet OKC fan. I think Gordon Hayward will fit well on that young team. Just kind of that veteran leadership. I mean, they're right in it in the West. They can make a run here.
Absolutely.
So I think Gordon, and they have so many draft picks that it's like it doesn't hurt anything giving up what they gave up for Gordon Hayward at all because that front office has just done so well. I think the Mavs getting PJ Washington was also a good move because I think Williams, he wasn't really doing too much for them. I talked to Tyler about this, and he says Williams just didn't really fit well there. And getting PJ Washington, he was excited about that move. And I think that could be good. Just a guy that's been on really bad teams early in his career, but he's shown that he's can be a really good basketball player. So I think him being just kind of a role guy with the weapons they got in Dallas, and then Derek Lively, how he's looked in his rookie season, he's been really impressive. So I thought that was a good move for the Mavs, but they're going to have to make a run down the stretch here because it's just been way too inconsistent with them. I want to talk about Embid because he's hurt again. What do you think? Do you think something needs to be done with the Sixers going forward? Do they really need to? Because we talked about load management and how, normally it's just a pain in the ass, but there's really guys out there that need that load management. Embiid is a guy that was banged up at Kansas. Like he was never healthy there, and it just followed him to the league. He's always having these injuries. So what do you feel like the Sixers should do? Can they rely on building a team around Embiid going forward and, counting on him to be there? Or do they have to shake something up?
I think they give it at least another year or two, honestly. I mean, the guy just won the MVP. He's obviously a very, very good basketball player. But with that being said, this is kind of a tough situation. So Embiid's hurt for pretty sure the rest of the season, isn't he? Or most of the season?
It's looking like that, but it's looking like he'll come back in the playoffs as of right now.
Well, with that being said, you ride it out until the playoffs to see what happens. If he comes back, that's great. You guys can still make a push. They're a great team otherwise. But if he's not ready and he's not looking like he's going to be ready, that kind of puts you in a tough situation. I'd say get him healthy, make sure everyone comes back, or make the moves you need to, because Philly with Embiid and especially with Maxey now, that kid has been a superstar this year. He is absolutely exploded. I mean, we've seen glimpses of it in the past, but this year he's really taken off. With Embiid healthy and that kid playing with the team that they have, that's an Eastern Conference contending team. I mean, really, the way I see it, the East has 4 of those, and Philly's definitely one of them. Boston being another one. We already mentioned the Knicks, and then we'll get to the last one later on.
I'm assuming you're referring to Milwaukee.
I'm definitely referring to the Bucks.
Yeah, who they got Doc Rivers now. They fired their coach after I think they were 32-9, something, or 32-11. I don't know what it was exactly.
There was some
but
locker room
fired their
stuff that
coach.
happened with that, from what I understand.
Okay. And they weren't playing any defense, and they're still not playing any defense, so I'm not sure. And they just lost to Memphis, who was a 14-point dog last night. That was interesting. Just very inconsistent team in Milwaukee right now. So we'll get into, the big picture of each conference, but right now, first half of the season, one team from each conference that has really been a pleasant surprise?
Well, I gotta say Cleveland, I think, for the East. The reason why I say Cleveland is because, they were a 4 seed last year. They were good last year, but they were also a first round out. That team has really gelled together. Evan Mobley has started to play a lot better basketball. He's not quite where he needs to be, but everything besides scoring is starting to come around. That's why they're my Eastern Conference pick. My Western Conference pick would have to be the Timberwolves. Now, on paper, yes, they looked great, but there were a lot of people out there saying that Cat and Rudy could not play together. Well, they're playing great together, and Anthony Edwards' production is off the charts. So that would be why they're my West. And if you look at the standings, it kind of shows. I mean, the Cavs are number 2 in the East, and Timberwolves are leading the West, and they have been for a lot of the season.
Right, majority of the season. Which team's been the biggest disappointment this first half?
See, I actually have 3 for that one. It's kind of weird. I got 2 West and an East. So in the East, I'd say the Wizards. On the interior, it looked like they were really, really, really hyped for Jordan Poole, and they haven't done anything. They've won sub 10 games, I believe, this year. It's not great so far. Honestly, I'm surprised he was somebody who didn't get moved to the trade deadline. With that being said, moving on to the West, Spurs are one of them. Now, granted, they were the number 1 pick in the lottery last year, and they got Wemby. But even with Wemby's production, they're not really a whole lot better than they were. Kind of expecting them to make a little bit of a jump. Not a crazy high jump, but more than what they're doing right now. Just because of the way that kid's been hyped. And my other one in the West that I kind of had him tied with were the Suns. Everybody thought that super team was going to blow up. It was going to go crazy. They really haven't met standards. Still had a lot of injuries, and I feel like that if Bradley Beal doesn't remain healthy and consistently stay playing, it's just kind of going to be a do-over of what the Suns were last year, which isn't a bad thing, but it's not the goal.
I think Phoenix is starting to learn how to play together now. I think they're starting to play a lot better basketball, and I'm hoping for that because I feel like that could be a really fun team to watch down the stretch if they get their thing going in that Western Conference. Because I mean, Kevin Durant being what he is still, Devin Booker, Brad Beal. Dude, the game we went to last week, Booker didn't even play. Grayson Allen out there in the starting lineup had 15 dimes, 15 assists for Grayson Allen. And like, that's a guy who he's always making the right play, and he could shoot and he can create for others. If they can get better production, in the postseason from Nurkic than what they were getting from Ayton too, that can be an upgrade there. I'm not sure about their
Could be.
the worry I have about Phoenix is their depth. I don't know about their bench. So if you do have, one or two of those guys get hurt, what's this team going to look like? I was surprised they didn't make more of a run at the deadline to get some depth. I know they got Royce O'Neal, I believe is who they got at the deadline. Do you have any hope left for the Golden State Warriors, Los Angeles Lakers right now? Right now they're sitting, like that play-in zone in the Western Conference. Teams with older rosters, but they continue to hang on to their guys at the deadline, hoping to make another run. Do you think there's any hope left for these teams?
I think if Golden State's got a run in them, it's going to be this year, and that'll be about it. I'm kind of surprised they didn't make a move. They had a couple of contracts people were talking about moving. Chris Paul was one of them. Yeah, he's hurt, but they were still talking about trading him. Andrew Wiggins was another one, but he's also started to turn it around just a little bit. With the Lakers, again, this has kind of got to be their last run. LeBron stated for years that when his son comes to the league, he's going to go to the team his son goes on. And with the Lakers sitting where they're sitting, just kind of on the cusp, if they don't make the play-in or lose early in the play-in, they're kind of in that middle pick purgatory where you're not quite good enough to have or not quite bad enough to have a lottery pick, but you're not good enough to be late on in the playoffs. With that, I don't think that's enough to get LeBron's kid because I think he's going to fall to the second round and they're not going to be desperate enough to get him that early. So I think that's kind of got to be a point they've got to make. They're either going to do something this year or it's going to get blown up next year.
It is All-Star weekend right now. Off the top of your head, who do you think the biggest All-Star snub was this season?
This one I'm incredibly biased about. I'm biased because even though he was still an All-Star, I think Jalen Brunson was the biggest snub. I don't believe that Damian Lillard did enough in the first half of the year to denote him being a starter. But Jalen Brunson he's been balling out of control. Like, people were wondering when he came to New York if he was him, and he's him. Like, kid's going to be first team all league if he's not, he's second team. He should be first team. He's playing that good. That's my biggest snub. I will say most deserving, though, was Tyrese Halliburton. 100%. Kid's been playing crazy in Indiana. I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago when we were talking about it. He's averaging right now the same numbers Russell Westbrook averaged in like 4 of his 5 All-NBA seasons. Which, just to take that into context, I mean, it's not triple-double level, but he's averaging all NBA numbers right now.
Oh, for sure. I love Halliburton. He's so fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Going down the wire, if you had to choose right now, who's your pick for NBA MVP? And then who's your dark horse?
My pick for NBA MVP right now, it'd have to be Luka. I mean, again, I went over this. If he misses 8 more games, he's out of the run. But he's leading the league in points per game. He's third in assists. He's got 8.8 boards a game. That's definitely noteworthy. I'd have to say second for that would probably be Jokic. And then my dark horse is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think that he's my dark horse because if we take into account what he's doing for his team and how much he means for his team, very much like Luka, yes, OKC is good, but they would not be the team they are right now without him.
Love Luka. Right now, the Mavs are sitting 7th place in the West, 7 games back in a very crammed Western Conference right now. To me, I think Denver has still got to be the favorite, defending champs. They've been there. They've done that. They got Jokic, absolute machine, and he's so good in the playoffs. Like, just talked about the Lakers. They just blew the doors off them last year in the playoffs. And if they were to play the Lakers right now in the first round again, I would bet on it being a sweep. I really would. I know Denver has, maybe they're not as impressive as Minnesota in the West, but to me, they still got to be the favorite. The Clippers, they started out really slow when they got James Harden, but after they got, used to playing with each other, that's a team that's really exploded, and they look like a serious contender down the stretch. But in that packed Western Conference, who would you put your money on dethroning Denver?
So this one's going to throw people a little bit, but if there's any team that's going to beat Denver in the playoffs, I think it's the Sacramento Kings. The reason why I think it's the Sacramento Kings is Kings are already 3-0 on Denver this year in regular season. All 3 games Jokic played. Murray's only played 1, but they've been decisive enough that I don't know if Murray would have had the impact to maybe change the course of that contest. They do play again, I believe, just shortly after the All-Star break ends. And the Kings are sitting kind of low also, which means it won't be a first-round game, but second, maybe semifinals, finals for the Western Conference. I think if it's a Kings-Denver Nuggets matchup, I think you would bet on the Kings.
You're speaking that highly of the King. We're talking about all those teams in the Western Conference that I've mentioned. You really think that highly of the Sacramento Kings? That's interesting.
I think when it comes to beating Denver, yes. I'm not saying that they're going to potentially walk away with the entire West. It's entirely possible. They play very, very good ball. De'Aaron Fox is someone to worry about, and so is Domantas Sabonis. Those 2 players are not bad at all. And you forget Harrison Barnes has been quietly playing very good ball out in Sacramento. They are a very good squad.
I like Keegan Murray a lot too, but that's crazy that out of all those teams, you're throwing out the Kings. How about Eastern Conference? Who's the best chance? You talk about the Knicks being able to knock off Boston, but besides them, who do you think can knock off Boston in the East?
Well, the Bucks have the size, but they haven't really been playing to the way they should. We'll see in a few weeks how that looks with Doc Rivers. Obviously, he's had a little bit of time, but sometimes it takes a little bit to have those changes move forward. I'm going to throw another kind of wild one at you, and I think the Cavs. I think they're deep enough, and I think they have enough scoring that they could potentially also take down Boston.
I don't consider that to be wild at all. Right now, like we said, they're sitting at number 2, and that's a team that is – I just think they're so deep. And Donovan Mitchell can really get hot, and he's got role players that – I mean, Garland, since he's been back, that's Darius Garland is fun. He's one of the most underrated players in the league, in my opinion.
That team's really come together since the end of last season.
Allen. They play, it just feels like they play really well as a unit, and they have that superstar. Like, they were a team where we could see it coming in Cleveland with all that young talent, but they were just they were missing their leader. And now they have that in Mitchell. And yeah, they lost beginning of the playoffs last season, but the way they're playing right now, I would have to agree. They're going to be a scary team going down the stretch that people aren't going to want to play. So I talked about with Adam about the next one in hockey and Connor Bedard. There's just that phenom rookie in the NHL right now. We got the same thing in the NBA with Wemby. Talked about how it's been a disappointing season overall for the Spurs, but he has been, you can see he's going to be special. What are your thoughts on him as a whole?
Wemby is, I'm going to use a phrase that a lot of people used when Porzingis first came into the league. He's a unicorn. He's one of those players. He's got the size to play excellent defense down the post. He's got a very, very crisp and clean jump shot. He can do it all. He's got ball handling skills like a guard. If he can stay healthy and he can continue to have the production, the Spurs just got to build around him, and we'll be watching another Tim Duncan, David Robinson type situation if he can stay healthy. It's a tough call, though. I mean, like hockey, there's a lot of games in the year, and the Spurs aren't exactly starting out hot, and next year's draft doesn't look like it's going to have any amazing, crazy talent in it. That being said, it's still kind of early, and March Madness is kind of what kind of makes or breaks college basketball. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see what kind of rookies we have coming in next year, and hopefully the Spurs have a shot at getting a lot better.
Agreed. Well, Seeger, this has been great. Last thing before you go, if the season were to end right now, who's your team coming out of the East? Who's your team coming out of the West?
So in the East right now, I'd have to say, with injuries and everything going on, I'd have to say Boston. Just strictly because there's not really a team that I feel coaching wise or injury wise that's going to be able to take them for 7 games. Unfortunately, not to make a crazy hot take or anything, but I'd have to say Minnesota also. They've been playing incredibly hot basketball. Anthony Edwards is a freak of nature. And with Cat and Rudy down low, they're going to be really hard to beat in the playoffs. A 7-game series is going to be tough.
I'm going to get crazy with it with my prediction. I'm going to go Denver Nuggets getting back in the West against the New York Knicks coming out of the East.
The Knicks were healthy, they'd be a lot higher on my list. Unfortunately, those injuries have me worried.
The Garden would be rocking.
Oh,
we'll see,
God.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
They'd have to rebuild the foundation if the Knicks made it back to the finals.
They would. Well, this has been great, Seeger. Thank you again for joining me tonight, talking some NBA. We'll be sure to have you back on here. You know, when Tyler's back, we'll dive into some NBA when it gets down the stretch, closer to the playoffs. But thanks again, man. Have a great night.
Absolutely. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
I want to thank Seeger once again for coming on, talking some NBA first half of the season recap. We'll be sure to have him back on as the NBA season winds down. Well, that's it for the episode. Thank you again for all the guests that joined me. Thank you to everybody listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Tyra will be back with me next week, and we'll dive into the latest in sports. Y'all have a good one. Thank you.
When I come to your city, I'm a new score. Broke your high score soon as I step through the door. Tryna stack my paper up like a bookstore. Money kissing each other like a rock and roll tour. When I come to your city, I'm a new score. Broke your high score soon as I step through the door. Tryna stack my paper up like a bookstore. Money kissing each other like a rock and roll.